Beneath the fading hues of a sunset over a remote countryside, yet another day slipped by in Diep's life like a sorrowful melody, its lingering low notes filled with yearning. The vast rice fields stretching before her no longer shone with the brilliant gold of harvest season, but lay in a languid stillness, much like her own soul, a barren land clinging to a fragile hope. Episode 8 opens with Diep standing silently amid the fields, her calloused hands tightly gripping a bamboo cane, and her melancholy eyes fixed on the distant horizon. She knew that behind that sunset, the shadows of the past still lay in wait, ready to drag her back into the painful spiral from which she had once tried to escape. Inside the small farmhouse on the estate, once a brief haven of peace beside CO James, only emptiness remained. The modest belongings James had brought, the warm blanket, the new set of clothes, still lay quietly on the old wooden bed, like the fading remnants of a beautiful dream. Di stood there, her hand gently caressing the soft edge of the shirt that James had given her, as an unnamed longing surged within her. "He gave me everything, from safety to trust," she whispered, her voice merging with the cold wind seeping through the window cracks. Yet, suddenly, her eyes grew distant, as if another wind, colder and more merciless, was pulling her back into a harsh reality. That day, when the morning light had yet to warm the dew on the leaves, Diep received a call from Uncle Kien, the blood uncle who had raised her through years of hardship. His hoarse voice resonated through the old telephone like a sharp blade striking her heart. "Diep, you must return to Pau's house. Their family is demanding the 2 buffaloes I once accepted. If you don't come back, they'll squeeze the debt on my home and I will have nothing left to live for." His words were like a sentence, forcing Diep to confront a truth she had long tried to escape: the enormous debt of the past. Not merely a monetary burden, but also the invisible bonds of duty and kinship. Diep sat at the small wooden table, her trembling hands clutching the telephone tightly. "Uncle Kien, I don't want to go back there," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I've suffered enough. The scoldings, the lashes, I cannot relive those days." Yet from the other end, Uncle Kien's sigh of despair echoed. "Diep, I know you suffer, but I have no other choice. If you don't return, my family will be ruined. You are my last hope." Those words wrapped around her heart like an invisible cord, binding her to the painful memories she had tried so hard to forget. In that moment, Diep looked around the small farmhouse, the place where she had once felt the warmth of James. Vivid memories surfaced. The hot bowls of porridge he had cooked, the times he silently stood by her side in the late hours to ensure her safety. "James, you are the only light in my life," she murmured, tears streaming down her gaunt cheeks. Then, she rose, wiped away her tears, and vowed to herself, "I cannot let Uncle Kien lose everything because of me. I must return, even if it feels like descending into hell." Elsewhere, under the brilliant light of the CI office, James sat lost in thought at his desk, his sorrowful eyes fixed on his phone screen. News about Diep had reached him through brief text messages from the security team. "Diep has left the farm. It seems she has returned to her ex-husband's home." His heart felt constricted as memories of Diep, her rare smile and the determined look in her eyes despite all the suffering, washed over him like a raging tide. "Moiti? Why did you choose that path?" he wondered, his voice fading into the quiet of the office. James rose and stepped out onto the balcony, from where he could see the vast fields stretching into the distance. He recalled the days he had tried so hard to protect Diep, the times he had stood on the dangerous edge to ensure she remained unharmed. "I promised to give you a new life, a place where you wouldn't have to live in fear," he murmured, his hands gripping the railing tightly. Yet now, the stark reality that Diep had chosen to return to Pau weighed on him as if his heart were being torn apart. "Was I not good enough to keep you?" he questioned, his eyes dimming with tears he struggled to hold back. Meanwhile, at the old family home of the Pau family, Diep entered with a weary gait, the bamboo cane slung over her shoulder heavy with painful memories. Mrs. May, her ex-mother-in-law, stood at the door, her cold, sharp eyes sweeping over her like a knife. "You're back, huh? Where's the money from today's sales?" she snapped, void of any compassion. Diep set her cane down and, with trembling hands, pulled a few coins from her shirt pocket. "I only managed to sell this much," she replied softly. though her voice was laden with resignation. Snatching the money away, Mrs. May's eyes flared with anger. "You worked all day and that's it? Or are you hiding money somewhere?" she demanded as she stepped forward, rifling through Diep's pockets. "Who did you give the money to? I can tell by the look on your face. I don't trust you." Diep stood silently, her eyes empty, as if she had grown numb to such accusations. "I'm not hiding anything," she answered weakly, while inside her old wounds began to bleed anew. Pao then staggered in from behind, reeking of alcohol, his bloodshot eyes burning with fury as he glared at Diep. "How did you get so little money? I told you to sell tomatoes. You brought back only this?" he roared, clenching his fists as if to vent his rage. Diep bowed her head, her lips pressed tightly together. "I only managed to sell this much," she repeated quietly, but Pao pressed on, advancing and rifling through her as if she were a criminal. "Or did you give the money to someone else?" "Do you dare cheat on me?" he bellowed, his drunken voice laced with madness. Mrs. May stood aside with her arms crossed, her tone as cold as ice. "See? Is she still hiding money? I've suspected it for a long time." Pao glowered at Diep, his eyes filled with scorn. "You go to bed with me right now because you've let my friends humiliate me. I have no patience for you." Diep recoiled, fear evident in her eyes. "I'm not sleeping with you," she whispered. But Pao would not listen. He grabbed her hand and dragged her forcefully toward the bed. At that moment, Mr. Chiu entered, his voice deep and authoritative. "What are you doing? Let her go. Are you drunk again?" He stepped forward and pulled Pao away from Diep, his eyes reflecting a mix of disappointment and pity. "You just came back from drinking, got angry with your friends, and now you're acting like this?" Pao grumbled, but Mr. Chiu shook his head firmly. "Calm down. Don't force her. She's just returned home. This is not how you treat her." Diep sat curled up in a corner of the house, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees as silent tears fell. "I'm so fed up with this life, Father," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Back then, he wouldn't even let me sleep with him. He called me filthy. And now he forces me. I'm so scared." Mr. Chiu sighed and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Take it slow, you'll get used to it. Your husband has apologized and so has your mother. In time he will change." But inside, Diep, those words of comfort did little to ease the pain. She looked out through the gap in the door, where darkness was gradually overtaking the light, and whispered to herself, "If I run away, what will become of Uncle Kian's family? I can't let him lose everything because of me." A sense of helplessness overwhelmed her, like an invisible cage trapping her in endless days of suffering. At a small roadside bar, James sat silently amid the raucous laughter and chatter of those around him. Two young women, radiant and smiling brightly, approached his table with eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Hi boss, may we sit here?" one of them asked sweetly. James nodded, though his gaze remained distant. "Go ahead," he replied. "Are you feeling down about something?" the second woman asked, handing him a can of beer. "This one's on me." James managed a weak smile. "I just have some personal matters to deal with," he replied as he accepted the beer, though his heart remained heavy with thoughts of Diep. "Last time we applied for the secretary position at your company. Have you decided on anyone yet?" the first woman continued, her eyes gleaming with hopeful anticipation. James took a sip of his beer and replied in a low voice, "I'm still considering it. This job requires maturity, and you both are very beautiful and resourceful." The two women beamed, but James remained distracted. He stood up, leaving his glasses on the table. "It's getting late, I must be on my way." One of the women called after him, "You forgot your glasses." James turned back, picked them up and left, his mind still weighed down by his longing for Diep. In the Pao family home, night fell with an eerie, haunting stillness. Diep sat by the hearth, the flickering light casting shifting shadows across her scarred face, a face marked by a painful past. Pao lay sprawled on the bed, his breath heavy with the scent of alcohol, while Mrs. May silently tidied up, her eyes revealing a hint of regret, yet remaining cold. Mr. Chiu approached, his voice gentle. "Come down to the kitchen and rest. Don't worry too much." Diep nodded, clutching the worn mat that Mr. Chiu had given her. "Thank you, Father," she murmured, her voice soft and tired. After he left, she lay down and silent tears began to fall. "I don't know what to do anymore," she whispered. "If I run away, what will happen to Uncle Kian? But if I stay, I will forever be a prisoner of this past." At the PA office, James sat alone in the late hours, the dim light casting shadows on his face. Clutching his phone, he read the final message from the security team. "Diep has stayed at the powerhouse. There's no sign she's trying to escape." He sighed and thought to himself, "Diep, what are you enduring that you won't tell me about? I promised to protect you, yet now I'm letting you fall into their hands." Rising, he stepped out onto the balcony and gazed toward the distant fields. "I will not abandon you," he murmured, his voice echoing like a vow in the dark night. Meanwhile, at the Pow home, Diep sat quietly by the hearth, continuing to write in her journal. "Today, I returned to protect Uncle Kian, though I don't know how much longer I can endure. I miss James. I miss the peaceful days with him. But I can't let Uncle Kian lose everything because of me. I will stay and shoulder this debt, even if my heart is bleeding." Episode 8 concludes with the image of Diep sitting by the flickering firelight, her eyes reflecting both resilience and pain. She has chosen sacrifice to protect the family that raised her, yet the old wounds in her heart continue to bleed. Far away, James silently watches on, his heart heavy with regret and resolve. Pow, drunk and selfish, remains the looming shadow threatening Diep's happiness, and in that darkness, one burning question lingers. Can Diep ever find a way out of the shackles of her past, or will she remain forever imprisoned in unspoken sorrow?